Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. Just a couple quick housekeeping items. If you just take a moment and mute your cell phones. And also, if you'd like to speak, there was a table outside in the hall and you can sign up to speak at any time. If you didn't sign up to speak, you can go out there at any time during the meeting and sign up to speak. If you decided you want to speak on another item, you can go out there and sign up to speak, and then we have a list that populates on our screen to add your name to the speaker queue. When you do speak tonight, you'll see lights on the lectern there. When you stand up there, the green means go, orange means you're getting close to the end of your time, and red means stop, and there'll be a beep sound, and each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Also, we have one council person, Sage Turner, who is with us remotely. Actually, her microphone is pointing at a phone that is open. So she is joining us by phone, and that's under City Council Rule of Procedure 36B. She will not be able to vote, but she will be able to hear and participate in the meeting. And so with that, if everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, when I was recently visiting with the county commissioners, they have an opening video that features each commission member, which seemed kind of exciting, but just a suggestion. All right, so we're going to begin our agenda. We don't have any proclamations for this evening, so we're going to move right into the consent agenda. Do I have any questions, comments, or a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Kim, so moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and let me see if we've got one person signed up to speak under the consent agenda, and that is Jonathan Wainscott.
You should have introductory music for speakers too. That would be cool.
Walkout music.
That'd be great. My name is Jonathan Wainscott, and I know that the funding in, I think it's item G, the tourism development funding, $6.5 million roughly. It has nothing to do with our current water system, obviously, but just to put things into perspective, while we don't have the money here in Asheville to pay for proper maintenance of our water system, what we do have is money for another greenway, $2.3 million for a greenway in Buncombe County. Voters just approved 2 months ago $30 million in borrowed money for greenways. So we're really going all in on the greenways there. And then we have about $1.5 million for some type of renovation of Cox Avenue. It's 0.8 of a mile long, and we're going to spend $1.5 million on that. Again, we don't have the money for a proper maintenance of our water system here in Asheville. And we're going to make improvements to the golf course, which is great. I've been working on my long game. I hope everybody else is going to be out there this spring doing that. That seems to me to be less important than water. And, I know that this isn't in your hands to make these choices between this thing and that thing. But it does illustrate the silly rules that we are under by way of the North Carolina legislature. And I know that you've been getting a lot of heat recently from the North Carolina legislature about our water problem here, and maybe this we could illustrate to our legislators that here in Asheville, we have to play by stupid rules. And when we play by stupid rules, we play stupid games. And when you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes like an unnecessary $1.5 million decoration of Cox Avenue while we are in the midst of a water crisis. So that's just some perspective on the topic. And I'm sure that we'll be talking a lot more about the water situation tonight, and I don't blame you or council, and I know that it's been a tough week, so thanks.
Thank you. The second person that we had someone just sign up to speak is Grace Barron Martinez.
Hi, City Council. I just wanted to speak briefly about the 2023 budget calendar. I can't help but notice that there's only one opportunity for public comment on the budget priorities, and by the time the public hearing comes around on May 23rd, you will have already created an entire budget without involving the people of the city you are elected to represent and engage with on these matters. This will be the third budget cycle that I have been following with you all, and as a person who has experience with budgeting, the budget that you put out publicly has little to no useful information for those of us who have serious concerns about how money is being spent in our community. There are only top-line accounts shown, and we cannot see basic information about how we are, say, spending our public safety dollars. What are we doing with the budget surplus of the 40% reduction in staff at the police department? Totals of the number of grant funds that the police department receives, and how much we're investing in invasive real-time surveillance technologies. It's also wildly concerning that $142,000 of taxpayer money is going to Deputy Chief James Baumstark, whose sex trafficking trial starts today, where he's accused of telling a detective to keep quiet and knew that his fellow officers were extorting sex from trafficking victims. But I know that City Attorney Brad Branham warned you all you're not allowed to talk about that, or you could all lose your positions and be charged with misdemeanors yourselves. This is not how you engage in transparency in the public. We need a people's budget, and we need participatory budgeting. We need to meet people where they are at and seek to engage with them in accessible ways if we want to create a resilient community where the voices of everyone who live here matter. Please consider amending your budget process to take the time to truly listen to the needs of the community. You could, for example, hold meetings where you receive public input in our local community centers. You could put out public surveys. You could give folks real data so that we could understand how our tax dollars are being spent. You could be centering communities most impacted by urban renewal and ongoing gentrification. While I expect more of the same, I will continue to ask for a people-centered budget. If any of you would like to discuss how we can work towards an inclusive budgeting process, I'm sure there are many community members and organizations who would welcome that, and I'm always available for those conversations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have our presentations and report, our manager's report, and I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. You know, it really gives me a lot of pleasure when I have the opportunity to recognize our employees. They always do exemplary work, but, and I've done this more than a couple of times, several times, as it relates to employee recognition, when our staff go way above the call of duty and do extraordinary things. Next slide, please. So tonight, we want to recognize Public Works Sanitation employees, Bryant Williams, Omar Rodriguez, and Stephen Sean McAllister. I would like for them to please stand and come to the podium, please. As you can see, they are shy, evidently, but we really, really appreciate you all. Next slide, please. And so I thought you could see from the slide. Can you go back? This is Bryant and Omar and Sean. Okay. So last month, this crew stopped and helped a couple that was being harassed by someone they were walking their dog in West Asheville. Omar and Bryant ran interference with the individual that was the aggressor and waited with him until APD arrived. Sean gave the couple a ride back home while APD, Asheville Police Department, was contacted. That person had evidently harassed some other people earlier in the day, and our Asheville Police Department said they had had some contact, but the person left and they were not able to intervene. The employees were nominated and voted by their peers this week for being public work employees for the month of December. Next slide, please. So Bryant has served in several roles, including working with our water department, then the Streets Division of Public Works, and finally with sanitation. He was recently recognized by the North Carolina chapter of the American Public Works Association as the top solid waste employee in our entire state. Omar Rodriguez, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, I apologize, is a proven sanitation employee, has been nominated twice for Employee of the Month. His work ethic and dedication to the job are just as undeniable as his spirit. And last but certainly not least, Sean McAllister rides on a rear packer with the crew and collects yard waste and trash. He has only been with the city since September 2022, but he is on his way to becoming a full-time employee. And we're really So thank you, Bryant, Omar, and Sean, for your dedication to the city of Asheville and the public. What's really, really important, I think, at this moment is when we think about public safety and we think about reimagining public safety, this is an example. It is not just APD's responsibility. We, as the city of Asheville, think it is our responsibility. And so we really, really appreciate your work. And if you don't mind, I would love to come down and shake you all's hand. And when I first came as a city manager, Bryant took me on a ride along on the truck. And I got firsthand experience of what it takes to ride on a solid waste truck. And so thank you all so much, and I still owe him a lunch. And we're going to do it. Thank you all so much for your service. I would want to see if Greg, if you have any comments. Greg Schuler is the Department Director for Public Works.
Thank you, Deborah. Mayor, Vice Mayor, your City Council, pleasure to be here. Right here is your heroes. This is a fine example of the men and women who take care of our city every day, keeping it safe, clean, and I could not be more proud to be a part of the team that we share every day. Thank you for the recognition of these fine folks.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it. I told you they were shy.
They're really not.
On most days, right? Thank you. Mayor, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Okay, under public hearings, we only had one public hearing and it needs to be continued until February 28th. Do I have a motion to continue public hearing item A until February 28th, 2023?
So
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving ahead, under new business, we have a resolution adopting the 2023 City Council Legislative Agenda, and I'll turn it over to the City Attorney Brad Branham to present that to us.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of council and the public. It is that time of year again where we take this opportunity to reach out to our General Assembly and give them our wish list, if you will, of the most important and instrumental legislative initiatives that we would like to see our local delegation, as well as the state delegation at large, advance on the city's behalf. It is always important that we align this particular agenda with the start of a legislative session, and we are now at the beginning of the very impactful long session, the 2023 long session of the General Assembly. And this is something that we've been doing now, again, for a couple of years. We haven't always done this, but we have, in the past few years and had some successful initiatives thanks to the help of our local delegation advancing some of these initiatives in the State House on our behalf. I'm going to go over all of the issues that we have included in our legislative agenda fairly briefly, but I will note we have 9 items. It's the largest legislative agenda that we put together in my time as city attorney. And it is also important to note that this does not represent the entire universe of things we would like to see the legislature do. We as a city staff and you as city council go to great pains to ensure that we are balancing the need to try to draw focus to those items which we feel are most pressing and that we can get legislative traction on. If we listed every single item, we would certainly be forced to give up some of the interest and noteworthiness of individual items for the greater whole. So we will always continue to try to strive through my office as well as other city staff and our contacts with the legislature to advance things throughout the long session that even do not appear on this list. But this gives us a chance to formalize some of the most pressing issues that city council is facing and seeing that our city is facing. So with that said, I'd like to highlight the 9 items that are on the proposed agenda for you. The first is a request to oppose legislation that would limit regulation locally on short-term rental of residential property. This is something that is felt keenly by cities such as Asheville that have such a strong demand from tourism. And we believe that reasonable regulation at the local level, where it is most apt to meet the needs both of landowning individuals as well as the public at large, allow us to protect not just the character of our communities, but the affordability of the housing stock that we have. The second item is a request to support new legislation for state funding to encourage and fund the development of new and more affordable housing. It is no secret to anyone listening that housing prices and rates of rent continue to increase as wages do not keep up. As a result, Asheville continues to struggle, as many cities throughout the country and our state do, with a lack of affordable housing. We believe that state intervention, both from legislative perspectives as well as funding, would go to great lengths to help us incentivize and subsidize the necessary affordable housing. The third item on the agenda is a request to oppose legislation that would further restrict local authority to do conditional zoning. This is a tool that is used not just by the city of Asheville, but by most large municipalities throughout the state. And we believe that it is a highly effective tool, not just for cities and developers to reach a mutually agreeable and most advantageous land development strategy, but it also provides unique tools in comparison to other options for the community to engage not just with council members prior to the process, but during public hearings for rezonings. The next item on the agenda is a request that the North Carolina Fair Housing Act be amended to add a new protected class, and that class would be source of income and funds. And I want to specifically thank Councilmember Roney for adding the word funds to this so that we can be as comprehensive as possible. As many people know, the state does have a Fair Housing Act which protects certain classes against discrimination. But despite that, and because of a lack of inclusion of this particular item, many people holding the housing choice vouchers as their primary source to be able to rent a home are turned away. And this amendment would add them as a protective class, which would give them additional avenues to secure housing, furthering the other goals of maintaining affordable housing for as many people as possible, as well as limiting homelessness. The next item on the agenda is a request to support new legislation to promote alternative public safety options. In line, as our city manager just mentioned, with the ongoing initiative of the city to reimagine public safety, and in consideration of a very similar program that's already been underway in Wilmington, we're asking for local authority for non-law enforcement personnel, in other words, civilian investigators, to respond to minor traffic incidents. Removing police officers from this particular interaction, which we believe would be an unnecessary use of that particular staff resource. The next item is a request to support state and federal reparations efforts. As you all are aware, City Council passed a resolution supporting local reparations for Black Asheville. But we have all been aware that also as part of that, we ask other governments at the state and federal level to join in that effort and to participate. And we are renewing, as part of this legislative agenda, that call on the state for themselves and our federal partners to join us in the effort of supporting through legislative initiatives as well as funding the reparations process. The next item is a request to support new state funding specifically to address water quality in the French Broad. Unfortunately, most recent analysis of 19 miles of the French Broad River in Henderson and Buncombe County has designated that stretch of water as being impaired. We believe that additional funding is absolutely imperative to address and mitigate that resource so that the French Broad can be restored. And finally, we are requesting again for more specific authority for municipalities to engage in electronic meetings. This was something we became very accustomed to during the pandemic and the governor's state of emergency and some legislation that was passed that temporarily allowed governments to meet electronically as opposed to in person. And we found that to be a highly effective tool, not just for council member participation, but also for the public at large to gain additional access to participate on boards and commissions, as well as with council meetings themselves. So we would ask for the state to officially add some additional authority to the existing language for open meetings laws. That, council, is the current 9-item agenda proposed for your legislative agenda. I want to thank each one of you for working diligently with my office to help put this list together. And it is our plan, as I said previously, once approved, with any changes you would like to make tonight, that we would present this to the local delegation, which we will continue to work with throughout the year to try to advance as many of these as well as other initiatives not even listed during this upcoming long session. And with that, I will close and happily answer any questions that you have.
I just wanted to lift up the Human Relations Commission meeting at their September 15th meeting. After a year and a half of work, made a recommendation around source of income and funds. This has certainly informed my understanding of what's possible and necessary because of impacted people who were involved in that conversation and the public engagement from the Human Relations Commission. So thanks to their advice to council on this matter.
And I will add my thanks to that as well. I think it's an excellent example of how the advice from our advisory boards does seep up to council and in a very real way becomes part of your initiatives going forward.
I'm also prepared to make a motion.
Please, go ahead.
I move to adopt a resolution to approve the 2023 City Council legislative agenda and to direct the city attorney to provide the resolution to the members of our local delegation.
Sandra, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we don't have anyone to sign up to speak under this item. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Brad. And I have to apologize because in my excitement here, I skipped over our unfinished business, an ordinance amending Chapter 15, Solid Waste Management of the Code of Ordinances related to yard waste collection to prohibit plastic bags for curbside brush and leaf collection, effective August 1, 2023. And Jess Foster is here to talk to us about this item.
So I'm not Jess Foster.
You're
Good
not.
evening,
You're not
members
Jess
of
Foster.
council. My name is Bridget Herring. I'm the Sustainability Director. Unfortunately, our Sanitation Division Manager, Jess Foster, is under the weather, and so stepping up in this moment to talk about this change. So just to give a little context on why we're here this evening, this is a follow-up from the guidance that you gave staff at your October 11th meeting to take a phased approach towards plastic reduction. And the first phase that we discussed and got direction on was to update Chapter 15 of our city code to eliminate plastic bags for the purposes of brush and leaf collection. So the change that you have before you tonight is relatively simple. It eliminates the references to using plastic bags for brush and leaf collection. It updates the processes and schedules to reflect our current practices and provides definitions for what acceptable bags and container types are. So just to reiterate that this is something, we introduced paper bags as an option in 2018 and have been encouraging and educating our community on the benefits of using these. This also supports your strategic priority to improve core services in addition to community cleanliness. as these bags tend to blow away after they're emptied on the curbside, and has the potential to eliminate 120,000 single-use plastic bags from the landfill annually. So I think this is a good first step in reducing single-use plastic consumption in our community, and if you have any questions, happy to answer those.
I have one question. Hi, Bridget. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing all this work and leading this for our community. In the resolution, it noted, this is in support of our resolution to reduce our waste 50% by 2035. And I was curious if we have any data updates on our performance towards that goal and how this effort contributes to that policy.
So the data number that we do when we measure it with our fiscal year, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I'm sure that we can get that information for you.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or a motion? Oh,
Good.
okay, motion? Does someone want to make the motion? Intent?
I make a motion, and I know how to do that. I think all I do is I read what's in the agenda, right? I say an ordinance amending Chapter 15, the solid waste management, the Code of Ordinances relates to yard waste collection to prohibit plastic bags for curbside brush and leaf collection. Oh, nope, I'm reading the wrong one. Thanks, girl. I make a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 15, solid waste management of the City Code of Ordinances related to yard waste collection to prohibit plastic bags, curbside brush, leaf, effective August 1st, 2023.
Second.
All right, great. Yeah, we get suggested motions, so we don't have to try to figure out how to word it. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and I don't have anyone signed up to speak under this item. But if somebody were to speak about this, they would probably say, can you bring back leaf trucks? Which the answer is unfortunately no, but this is a good step forward in eliminating single-use plastic bags, so more to come on that. All right, motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, thank you. Okay, back to new business. Item B, this is a resolution establishing an independent review committee focused on reviewing the water outage to assess infrastructure needs and the city's response and to determine what can be done to maximize prevention of future issues and improve response efforts. And this is actually going to be a presentation first, and I'm going to start with the city manager, and then you guys will take over.
Thank you again, and good evening again. We're going to provide you with an overview of what took place, the timeline, and as usual, we start with key takeaways, so it will almost be like a summary of what you will be hearing this evening. Next slide, please. And so this has been a fairly challenging experience for the community, for staff, and for our elected officials. A series of events associated with cold weather toward the end of December led to water outages in the southern and western portions of Asheville's water system for an extended period of time. And I personally know how disruptive it was because I experienced it. But I'm here to talk about how it disrupted the lives of you all, our residential customers, our institutional customers, and our business customers. This wasn't something that was easy to fix. There were a lot of complexities within our water system that contributed to the outages. And we want to say, and we've said it a couple of times, we regret that this happened, and we are taking immediate and long-term steps to prevent and minimize this event, hopefully, and the impacts of the event from occurring again. Throughout the response, and I want this to be very clear in terms of how we manage the response, we wanted to make sure every decision that was made was to ensure that we had safe drinking water for our customers. So tonight, council is going to create an independent review committee, or at least to direct the city manager to create this committee, to review and provide a comprehensive account of the water outage, an assessment of the operation on the emergency response and communication efforts, and needed infrastructure and procedural enhancements. Even though people may think that we are not investing in our infrastructure, there's $72.8 million that's been allocated and is planned for investments in and through our water capital improvement plan to enhance this infrastructure. Water department operations in the water CIP will be reevaluated based on the analysis of the independent review committee as we look at and review the CIP again. So I'm going to ask David Melton and also our Assistant City Manager, Ben Woody, to provide you with the details of what happened, talk a little bit about timelines, as well as more detail about the independent review committee. And I guess David Melton probably needs no introduction to the community now, because you've seen his face several times during the past 2 weeks. So David Melton is the director of our Water Resources Department. So David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I want to start with a water system overview. We have 3 water treatment plants. We have North Fork in Black Mountain, William DeBrule in Swannanoa, and Mills River in Henderson County. They produce a combined average of 21.5 million gallons per day. We serve around 156,000 customers every day, and our service area encompasses 183 square miles. For the water distribution system, we have 1,700 miles of 6-inch or larger water lines. To put this in context, that would reach to Miami and back, or if you prefer to travel to the west, it would get you into Utah from Asheville. We have 36 storage tanks providing 21 million gallons of capacity. We have 60,000 plus water meters, 18,000 plus valves, 41 pump stations, and we have a combination of gravity-fed and pump zones is the way our distribution system is made up. We also have 54 different pressure zones, and system pressures can exceed 400 pounds and average 170 pounds. To add a little context to that, some systems in flat areas have significantly less pressure zones, some as few as only 1 pressure zone, and fewer pumping stations are required because of that lack of pressure zones. And that speaks to our topography here in Asheville. And the typical system pressures in those type areas are 60 to 180 pounds per square inch. This is a sample of water distribution system. Pretty simple sample. You have your source, you have your treatment plant. It goes from the treatment plant to storage tanks, then from there to water mains to houses and businesses from there. Many systems like ours here in Asheville, there's connections between the water treatment plant and the tanks. And there's many valves located at various locations throughout the distribution system. And as I mentioned earlier, we have just under 20,000, a little over 18,000. This is an example of our water map or our distribution system. If you can follow from the upper right to the left is our 2 eastern plants. The flow naturally goes from there by gravity. This is part of our gravity zone. Flows from there to the western part of Bunker County throughout that part of the distribution system. Down at the bottom of the map is our Mills River treatment plant, and that's a pump plant, so that's part of our pumped water system, and it pumps from the south to the north back towards town. These systems are typically separated from each other. Part of that reason is the elevation of the two eastern plants would override the pumps at Mills River, so we have to keep those separated. We do have control points, though, in between that we can open up if the south needs a little bit of help. But while we're doing that, it's a balancing act. So if we have those control points open, we're not getting water to the western Buncombe County like normal, so we rely on tanks to help us balance that situation out. And you can see the darker green areas. Those are some of our pressure zones. They're kind of right on top of each other just because of the size of the map. But the important thing about these pressure zones and these dark zones is that also represents where our topography is higher. Those are usually in higher elevation.
And that means, what does that mean for us?
That is a pump system. So, and especially, went the wrong way. Really the wrong way. In the situation we had, it meant for those higher elevations for the pumps, it took longer to get water to those higher elevations than it did lower elevations. So, okay, now I'll go over the incident timeline.
Can we press pause on that for a second, just because
Sure.
this is an opportunity not just to inform us, but to inform the public. When we say it took longer to get water to people in higher elevation, that might explain why we would see an outage map that didn't reflect what people saw at the tap.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
it's really about, to my understanding, is building the pressure needed for people to access water at their location.
That's
Is
right.
that right?
And like I talked about previously with the number of storage tanks we had, typically in most places to get water to the other places, we have to fill the storage tanks first, then it leaves the storage tank, then goes to customers. Like I mentioned earlier in the sample, there is taps in between, so that's why some of the irregularities happen, that some people have water, some people didn't, some people have water before other people did. And that's part of the complexities that the city manager was referring to earlier. Can I answer any more questions on the map? That's pretty, I know it's a lot. Okay. For the incident timeline, on December 24th, staff started noticing breaks both on the public side and the private side. Some of the breaks we had on our side, and we can see on the 25th through the 31st, we identified and fixed 27 large water main breaks on the public side. We also noticed breaks on the private side with fire sprinkler systems, freezing and busting, irrigation systems, even customers' private plumbing line to their homes. Later that afternoon, Mills River Water Treatment Plant began to experience issues with the treatment. They had chemical lines freezing up and some other issues there that brought them a little bit of concern. So what we did was open the control valve that I was talking about earlier. So we opened up from the eastern western part to help the southern part. And of course, North Fork Water Treatment Plant increased production at that point, which isn't unusual. We do that from time to time. And even Mills River Water Treatment Plant went offline for a period of time on the 24th, which again, we have it offline from time to time. We had it offline most of 2020 for upgrades and maintenance and repairs and things of that nature. And actually, later on in the night, on Christmas Eve on the 24th, the plant actually came back online, but a little bit lower production rate, so we could maintain water quality. Moving on to the 25th, early in the morning, Mills River Water Treatment Plant went offline again. We had crews out. We sent crews looking for leaks and different things throughout the system, both private side and public side. If we saw that, we, of course, notified the customers of private leaks. We had irrigation systems that broke, where crews noticed that and asked the owners of the properties to take care of it, cut it off, get it fixed, that type of thing, to help us lower the demand we were seeing. And also later that afternoon, the Water Department enacted the Incident Command Center and began our meetings internally.
What effects do private leaks have on the entire system?
It creates more demand for the system. So that's for a fire sprinkler system, for example. Usually that's a closed system, of course, unless they have a fire. So it just adds to the demand.
And when there's more demand, what happens?
The plants have to ramp up to try to meet that demand. And we kind of go back to the balancing act, right? Of how much we can produce and get the water where it needs to go at that point, because it may be getting used by that demand before you get from point A to point B, where you're trying to go with it. So it just increases usage, I guess, maybe is a good way to put that.
And this was kind of a more unusual circumstance because it was a holiday, and so it may have been more difficult to reach people on the private side.
That's
to even
correct.
notify them of the,
That's correct.
okay.
And to that point, some of the folks probably didn't know they had leaks until they got back or got to open the businesses and things of that nature. Moving on to the 26th, part of the reason that we enacted the Incident Command Center so quick is we wanted to get in touch with our critical customers. These are high usage customers, our hospitals, our medical facilities, these type places. And part of the ask we asked them is to try to conserve as much as they could to try to lower this demand we were seeing. And as part of that balancing act, like I was talking about before, when you're taking water from the middle of the system and it's not getting to the western Buncombe County like it normally does, it needs a little help to help that balancing act that tightrope we were trying to walk through this process. So we have a portable pump that we use on occasion, and we deployed that to begin helping the western area, trying to maintain those tanks in western Buncombe County. Later on that evening, we came to the decision, which I'm going to tell you was a very hard decision to come to, that we needed to separate the two systems again and work on the two areas separately. So at that point, we closed the control valves and we isolated the southern distribution system. And we issued a boil water advisory for the southern area. At that point in time, we were hopeful that we'd have Mills River back online again that evening or early morning of the 27th, which didn't happen. On the 27th, crews notify private properties that service will be interrupted if they don't fix the leaks, cut them off, or address them to further help us with the demand. And at this point, later on that evening, we realized even with the portable pump in place, that the western tanks weren't recovering like we expected them to. Then on the 28th, Mills River Water Treatment Plant went back online, and we began water delivery began in the southern area. At that point in time, we were still losing western Buncombe County. So out of abundance of caution, we went ahead and issued a boil water advisory for the western area, because at that point in time too, we realized we had customers at higher elevations that were losing their water in western Buncombe County. During this time, North Fork alone was producing enough water for a typical day's use. They were around 1.5 million gallons. And of course, earlier on the 28th, we got Mills River back up and going, so we had all three plants producing, and they were producing roughly a little over 28 million gallons a day. But the demand was still too high to quickly fill tanks. And the demand, again, was coming from customer use, breaks, leaks, and of course, we were refilling tanks at the same time. So we had a lot of things going on where our demand was going and where the water was going. Let me back up to the 27th again. When we saw the western storage tanks weren't recovering that either, staff began the process of procuring a larger booster pump that we could deploy in the west to try to speed that process up of those tanks recovering. So on the December 30th, we got that larger pump in, we got it deployed for the western area and began pumping. Most of the day on the 31st, we were recharging the system. We were, at that same time, of course, staff was identifying and repairing water leaks throughout the process, and also surveying the system, checking valves, checking no water calls, doing a lot of things at one time. Then on January 1st, distribution of non-potable water begins. And luckily, the boil water advisory, because by that time we had the south recharged and we have water back in the southern area or southern part of our district. And we were able to lift the boil water advisory for most of the southern area. Then the remainder of that area, which is in higher elevations where we had to pump the tanks and fill those tanks before we could get water to that area, we got to lift that or the remainder of the southern area on January the 2nd. Throughout this process, we were still pumping water west, still trying to get that side of the system charged. And of course, there was demand in the middle the whole time, slowing the process. January 3rd, Council and County Commission calls for formation of an independent review committee, which Ben's going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Then on January 3rd, we got the western side of Buncombe County recharged, and the boil water advisory was able to be lifted the next day on January 4th. I would point out through this whole process, our water quality laboratory was in the system, taking samples for water quality and all the other parameters in, so we were constantly checking the system throughout this process. Any questions on the timeline?
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the decision made on December 26th to have the southern distribution center isolated. So my understanding is we've had Mills River offline before, and we're able to get water that is produced from our North Fork and our Beatree sites into the south, and that there's a valve somewhere that was shut off or can be shut off to isolate that system. What was the risk? Tell me about what was why was that decision made? Because a layman could say, was it better to have a boil water advisory for the whole city and still allow some people to have water in the south?
Well, at that point, when we came to that decision, part of it was to preserve as much of the water system we could and keep as much of the water system we could in water, if that makes sense, or in service, and to be able to split the two zones so we could work them independently. We would have, had we not done that, we would have had a boil water advisory for the whole system because it would have been a mixed system at that point totally. And we would have a much bigger outage, I'm afraid.
Tell me more about that, like from the engineering side. How would it have caused more of an outage? I want to understand.
It would have took, like I mentioned before, because of the elevation in the north, we would have overrode the south, so bringing Mills River back online would have been of very little use to us without that separation, because it would override the finished water pumps or the high service pumps at Mills River. Plus, we were filling
the water
tanks.
from the north would have.
Right, which would have starved more of the west.
Is that because, just
possibly
to
the north.
dovetail onto this, is that because we're gravity fed from the north for the bulk of our system from North Fork?
That's correct.
And Mills River is not, it's the opposite. It has to be
It has to
pumped
be
up
pumped.
into the system.
And so the water I still don't understand how that would turn into to more people like in the north or the central part of the city not getting water
Well, we would have been continuing to fill those tanks in the south.
from the south distribution plant. Okay, I'm with you.
Well, no, not if we had that open, because
saying
the
it wouldn't
pressure
push it,
from
yeah.
the eastern plants would override pumping capacity at Mills River.
Did we not have the capacity at that point, because of the demand level, did we not have the capacity for North Fork to refill all the tanks and serve everyone 100% in water?
No, I don't think so. We were, at
You-
that point, we were putting over 28 million in the system, and we were still losing ground.
All right, because you were saying earlier that we store 21 million gallons in our tanks.
If all the tanks are full.
If and when all tanks are full, we have a bathtub, if you will, collectively in the city.
Huh.
That's where that can hold 21 million. And then we have demand that's around 27 on a daily basis, just
I
in.
thought our daily is
About 21 and a
Yeah,
half million
21.5.
daily
Okay, so
is
we-
normal day.
So in order for the North Fork to have solved the problem for everybody, we would have needed the North Fork to have the capacity to fill up all the tanks and provide water at around 42 million gallons. And it just would not be able to do that volume.
It just wouldn't be able to keep up, that's right.
Okay?
I don't think he's
Because-
agreeing with your 42 math, but it
Yeah, I'm
sounds like what
sorry.
he's, yeah, it sounds like what you're, but the concept being, you wouldn't be able to recharge the system and provide water. You'd have outages.
So we have
Right.
regular water all the time, and we can handle that. If Mills River goes down, our daily production can scale up to serve that.
Sure.
But when Mills River went down and all of our tanks went dry or close to dry, that's where that really outstanding demand came from that wouldn't have been able to do
Well,
that.
but compounding it, what you explained was the leaks in the system were creating this artificially, it's not artificial, I mean, they were really happening, but it was creating a situation where the average daily consumption was being greatly exceeded. So just to meet demand, plus you're trying to recharge now because you've lost ground, it didn't sound like we had if I understand you correctly, we didn't have the capacity to solely serve the whole city and much of the county with Norfolk alone.
And give you an example, one of the leaks we found and isolated, and this leak was running into a storm drain, all underground, never surfaced, which makes it much more difficult to find those type leaks. Once staff found that leak and isolated it, production went down by 4.5 million
Oh my
gallons a day.
gosh.
So that was just
Wow.
one leak.
That's,
So I
okay.
think this is pointing me to, I appreciate the from Utah view of the timeline, but I really need like a more detailed timeline of events. Because even as we're getting more information, I know for some folks, this isn't the best way to receive information is verbally. Like we just need more information on those. For example, if one part is gravity fed, but another part is pump fed, and the pumps are constantly an issue, do we need to have an infrastructure change where South Asheville is also gravity fed, where we can serve the whole system?
I don't think it
But-
can be gravity fed because of the topography.
But at the same time, we would still need more of a timeline than just the overview, while the overview is appreciated.
And I think that we are, especially for the consumption of the general population, we were trying to just be as general as possible. We are in the process of sharpening our pencils and doing the very, very detailed analysis and assessment. And we think that this independent review committee will also be reviewing and possibly addressing some of the challenges that we may have in the system.
Can we go back to the timeline that we have for today? So I noticed that there was a really late delay in distribution of non-potable water. And I think for anyone who had hoped we would have non-potable water and people being able to flush toilets and have public health and sanitation covered sooner, that's, neither here nor there when we waited so long. And yet I heard that we're kind of just saying there was distribution. What was the city's role in distribution of non-potable water?
So,
David, I'm
yeah.
going to ask the chief.
Now you're moving into Buncombe County Emergency Services, so.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you. Scott Burnett, Fire Chief. So on December 26th, when David Melton called me and started providing information about the gravity of this incident. We started working on alternative water supply plans for fire protection, not for drinking water. That very next day, on the 27th, as this incident continued to grow, and as we learned more about it being much larger and much more extended, I was on the phone very early morning on the 27th with Buncombe County Emergency Services Director Taylor Jones, and we're discussing what unmet needs are out there, what unmet needs will be out there a week from now if this extends that far. Fortunate for this event, unlike most of the events that we deal with, all of the other systems were green. All our transportation system, our transit system, our power, our internet, everything else, fortunately, was all green. The very important outage of water was the unmet need that Taylor and I started working on plans to make sure that we met that unmet need for folks within our community. And so that began on the morning of the 27th. And so what we decided to do, the best plan from that point was to bring water to people that was drinking water that could be used for sanitation, for public health, most importantly for drinking. What we did not know was what was going to be the demand for that. We knew roughly the number of folks that were out of water. We also knew that typically in times like this, it's a small percentage of folks that choose to receive that assistance directly. And so we felt that we could meet that demand of delivering that water to people directly. We contacted the state of North Carolina, put them on notice and said, hey, this is our plan. If we need to expand this, we are going to need assistance from the state of North Carolina. They reconfirmed the emergency operation plan process for the state, which is that the state steps in and helps after local resources are exhausted, and we confirmed we're not anywhere near that. We also started talking to our distribution network for water, primarily Ingalls. Ingalls was reporting no disruptions in the supply chain. They felt no vulnerabilities in being able to supply us for quite some time. We also checked with other retailers throughout our community and region to make sure that they were in good shape as well. What they were reporting, retailers were reporting, was that sporadically shelves would get emptied, but they would fill them with their next delivery, which often would not be until that next morning. And so, especially in the southern area of our distribution area, shelves would be emptied quickly. We didn't hear reports when contacting those retailers directly of that occurring in the north, in the east, and even in the west, especially early on. So what we were able to do beginning the 28th, and from identification of the need to get water in people's hands on the 27th to actually having water at people's doorsteps was about 18 hours. And so that system was ramped up quickly, and we utilized Buncombe County employees. We used City of Asheville employees. We checked in with the Red Cross about their availability for volunteers, and ultimately ended up about 3,000 folks were delivered water throughout the incident, beginning on the 28th. Also beginning on the 28th, using the climate justice map and also our neighborhood connectors, we were able to reach out to neighborhoods and communities and place about water for about 500 folks to places that may not be able to call or even know that water was available in areas that had been identified as vulnerable areas to climate emergencies based on that climate justice map, and communicating with those folks with our neighborhood connectors. Moving into January 1st, we expanded that to include that non-potable water at that point. The risk of using non-potable water is if that water is available, then there's a risk of somebody drinking that. And so that's why that was a last resort. On the first, just being, making sure that we were as cautious as possible, and worst case scenarios, if this goes another week, then those direct delivery of drinking water supplies might be at risk if we were to go another 7 days of doing that. And so the decision was made to set up some areas for non-potable water for that. And so that's the timeline on how that water delivery was established.
Thank you.
Yeah.
From my experience helping neighbors with non-potable water in South and West and in the county, one of the things that I realized is that we had some gaps in communication. Folks speaking Spanish, Russian, Ukrainian, folks in the deaf and hearing disabled community that weren't able to access 211. So that's in my long list of questions. I know we're not going to get into all of those today, but as we get in from that 50-foot view closer in, I think those are some of the questions that still linger.
Yeah. Excellent feedback. Thank you.
And I will say, as we're not there yet, but we're going to get into the committee piece of it to take a look at this. And I agree. I think it's very important to look at the emergency service piece of it, because my impression is what the chief just talked about, kind of that threshold evaluation of what the needs are in the community, and then there's kind of above and beyond that. And how do we integrate that expectation into our emergency management response, essentially? Okay, and our next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm sorry my voice is a little scratchy. I've had a sore throat for a few days, so I apologize for that. Ben Woody, Assistant City Manager. I'm gonna talk about our communications timeline, some after-incident actions, and then I'll wrap up staff's presentation with the independent review committee that you're considering establishing tonight. So I'm just gonna, dive right in, and I'm gonna have first an overview slide of the total numbers of communication and the mediums that were used during this outage incident, and then the next slide I'm gonna show a timeline for those individual communications. And so city typically uses multiple platforms to communicate with the public. We do that oftentimes simultaneously. AVL alerts is obviously one that we used a lot in this particular event. Social media, website updates, press releases, conferences, those are the typical mediums that the city uses to communicate with the community. To give some context of just the total numbers of communication, and I'm using the date range December 25th through January 4th, the city sent out 38 AVL alerts, and just to be clear, maybe not everybody probably received all 38. Some of those were system-wide. AVL alerts allows us to also send updates to certain geographies or to target certain areas. So some of those were specific to certain areas, communicating particular information. Provided 118 social media posts across those different platforms, 204,000 plus unique web page views, so that's people coming to the city's website to get information, 12 press releases, 6 press conferences, and then one thing that we've gotten questions on is how do we communicate to council? Council initially received AVL updates early on January, I've got the wrong date there. Hopefully, glad it wasn't January 27th. That would not have been good. December 27th, Ms. Campbell, our city manager, sent an email to council giving them an update on at that time, the status of the water outage. And of course, we had multiple press releases and conferences. One thing that also occurred as the response ramped up is from 12/28 to 1/4, the community engagement department began to do some neighborhood outreach, or what I would call really direct outreach, and that is that department beginning to lean into their neighborhood contacts and community leaders and just trying to check in, share information, ask them to share it in their networks, ask if there's anything we could do. So again, on 12/28, we began to ramp up those kind of direct contact outreach. I'm not going to read this whole slide. It has a lot of information. It is in the, it's linked on the agenda package, so anybody can go look at this, but I will give a little bit of an overview. This graphic is our communications timeline. It kind of runs in sync with our incident timeline that David Melton reviewed. And what you can see across the top is we've kind of categorized the communication efforts beginning on December 21st all the way through January 6th, actually. Ran out of room for the dates on this one. But what you can see is some of the we knew cold weather was coming, so there's always some information that goes out to the community to ask people to prepare for that. You can see as we move through this, what we're doing is adding the different platforms and the number of communications that went out. So, for example, on December 26th, we had 4 AVL alerts. You can see 10 social media posts and then 2 website updates. And then, or go ahead, I'm sorry, excuse me.
At the end of the AVL alert, it'll say, press 1 if you receive this message. Do we have that hit rate?
Yes, we will have that hit rate. I will give Dawa Hitch a lot of credit. Her department has compiled a tremendous amount of data, and they still are around how, do you want to add anything to that, Dawa? I don't want to say anything incorrect.
Just to say that we can get that data. Those AVL alerts were sent out by our water department, and we can certainly pull the data to see how many people opened or replied to that message.
Thank you. And that was Dawa Hitch, our Communication and Public Engagement Director. And then just to give one more example, and I think this is probably really when I think all communication channels were in full effect, and this is, again, to refer back to Chief Burnett, this is when the water delivery began. And so on December 28th, for example, you can see the AVL alerts that were provided, the social media posts, the website posts, we had press releases, we had press conferences, and that's really when that neighborhood direct outreach began. So again, I'm not going to read through every one of these columns on the chart, but would just like to share this as information for the council and the community.
Before we move on from there, do we have a protocol that was loosely pulled from? Because I know there's going to have to be improvisation and a response specific to an incident, and/or can this inform future protocols for emergency response?
I don't.
So I imagine like there's a menu of, okay, there's going to be a power outage, but it's related to a water outage, so we're gonna like follow this protocol when there's snow on the ground versus if there's not snow on the ground or something like that.
So I'll answer the second question and see if Chief or Dawa want to answer the first. But yes, we'll absolutely learn from this and use this to improve protocols moving forward. So I know I can answer your second question, Councilwoman Roney.
Most definitely. And so we do have a matrix as far as what communication tools are used for emergency management and different types of emergencies. Absolutely, the lessons learned from this incident, we'll derive that, we'll improve that, and significantly update how we use those tools.
Because one of the things that I was hearing during the press conferences and before and after was that some of the communications were taking time because we were having to start from scratch on some content. And I wondered if it's possible for us to maybe get ahead of communications by having some initial emergency response protocols and deepening that understanding, and it might save some staff time and help get information out more quickly.
And Chief, we're in the process of creating an updating an emergency preparedness plan, as well as a continuity of operations plan. And all of these things will be incorporated. And it is unfortunate that we had to have this incident, but I think we will learn a lot from it to be incorporated. And this plan is not just for water emergencies, but general emergencies as well.
Thank you. And as I'm getting, I know all of us are getting a lot of input from the public on this. Do we have a clear answer to why not, out of an abundance of caution, have a boil water advisory system-wide?
I mean, I think I'm going to give a brief answer to that. I think there are impacts to property owners and customers when you issue a boil water advisory in terms of their ability to operate their business, to provide services at a medical institution, to have school in session. So I think there are implications for unnecessarily casting a boil water advisory citywide. I think that has a pretty dramatic impact on people's ability to do business, and that's not something that we would typically want to do unless we had to.
And not just business. I think the school piece of it and the hospital piece of it is probably a primary driver. But business impacts are very important, but in terms of like being able to meet the critical needs of the community.
And nursing homes, and it just, that vulnerable population that we didn't want to impact, in
But
particular
but I do
hospitals.
think this is yet another piece that I think this committee will look at. Obviously, we just saw a series of decisions were made, and hindsight is 20/20, and I think, and, you know, I am not a trained water engineer, so I don't know what engineers learn in terms of protocols, when they're supposed to make a decision about isolating or not. So I think that'll be all part of the review to check those decisions and make sure they are appropriate for what the situation called for.
All right, I will continue then. Going to spend a few minutes talking about after incident action, and we've really created two slides. One is some of the immediate things that are happening now, and then two will be some of the things that we anticipate happening as the independent review committee does their work. The first thing is, let's talk about what's happening right now. Again, I want to reinforce that we understand how difficult this was for many residents and customers here in Asheville, and we know that it will get cold again this year. So we are already preparing, and I say we, really it's really our dedicated water staff and other departments that are already preparing to make sure to minimize any risk of this happening again. So one of the first things that we're going to talk about in a minute is council is forming this independent review committee to do this analysis and help us prepare for the future. In terms of the city departments, they are water in the lead on this, but all the responding departments from this incident, they're finalizing their own internal assessments, root cause analysis of these events. Number one is that'll help them prepare for, again, it will be cold again, so we want to be ready for that. And then also this information that can be shared with the independent review committee as well. So those are things that are already in motion. I'm going to cover a couple of things that relate really to our water treatment plants, but I want to give a caveat before I do that. I want to make sure that the public understands that the equipment at these plants, there is heat tape in place, there is insulation on the pipes, there are enclosures that exist. So these plants were insulated. Staff understands that it gets cold and there are challenges, and so I just want to reinforce those things are in place, and they were in place 2 weeks ago. But understanding that we did have some equipment that really failed or had issues in this cold weather, staff has already begun the process of replacing, sealing, enclosing, doing more to these components and pieces of equipment to make sure they can maintain heat and prevent moisture intrusion. That includes replacing and relocating chemical lines, trying to create redundancies where we can. Again, providing additional insulation, so not insulation, but additional insulation to our outside lines to make sure that where lines pass through walls, we have additional measures in place. And where we did have some equipment that had malfunctions or failures, we've asked the manufacturer to provide site visits to check that equipment. To be clear, these things are happening at Mills River Treatment Plant, but they're also happening at the other two plants as needed. So again, I just want to give some confidence to the public that the staff is already taking immediate actions to try to ensure this doesn't happen again. And then a little longer term, so these are things that I anticipate will really begin to come out of the work of our independent review committee. So this is probably 90 days out or greater. Obviously, any analysis and findings that our independent review committee makes, and we're about to talk about that, that's my next slide, the city will want to consider and prioritize any operational changes that may come out of that. If there are equipment or infrastructure improvements that are necessary, we clearly want to prioritize those. I'm going to jump ahead a bullet. As we prioritize any equipment or infrastructure improvements, we'll want to make sure that's reflected in the Water's Capital Improvement Program that Ms. Campbell referenced earlier. And then finally, we talked about this, and I think Councilwoman Roney, some of your questions point towards this step, is we want to implement the lessons learned from this event into our what we are moving forward with. And I'll give a little more detail on a new continuity of operations plan and a new emergency operation plan. And of course, with any plans that we put in place or new measures, we would also want to provide training for our staff to make sure we can execute that. So I want to take a second to talk about plans, if that's okay. Let me start with the water department. The water department has an existing emergency response plan. I want to be clear on that. That plan was adopted in 2021. It's an interdepartmental effort by the water department and other departments, and that response plan included tabletop exercises as recently as December. So there is a response plan in place for the water department, as well as our production services and distribution services have emergency action plans in place. What's great about the continuity of operations and the emergency operation plans that our fire department is taking the lead on, those are all encompassing citywide hazard plans that will also include our water system and water distribution. So I think both those documents and planning efforts provide a great opportunity to incorporate any lessons learned from this event and any other event that may come in the future. And just to give a quick update, fire department told me today that they've selected Persis Consulting to help move those planning processes forward. That is scheduled to come to council for a contract approval on January 24th. And I anticipate that public engagement on those planning efforts will begin in February. So again, that was work that was already underway prior to this most recent outage.
And Ben, if I could add, that will come to the Environment and Public Safety Committee on the same day. So it'll go to committee, then come to council for action.
You mentioned plans. Is there a communications plan already? Like an emergency management communications plan?
That seems a tight turnaround to go
part
to
of that.
committee and then council for approval on the same day and have a meaningful engagement around that.
For the plan?
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to
It's
understand,
just
like,
to execute.
right, to
the
execute, okay.
contract.
Just making sure.
Just the contract to move forward with the work.
Okay.
So I know, I'm going to take a stab at your question, Councilwoman Mosley. I know that there are communication plans or communication protocol that are part of and embedded in most response plans and operation plans. So I would think that there is information in the plans that we have and the plans that we will have that help inform our communication strategies. I can't give you a specific answer of what those are because I don't have that in front of me at the moment. But we can follow up with that. And Dawa, do you have anything? Or am I? And I'm sorry to keep turning to my peers behind me, but I do need their help for some of this.
I'm happy to answer the questions. Dowa Hitch, Communication and Public Engagement Director. And just to be clear, are we? So could you ask the question again? I want to make sure, Mosley, I want to make sure that I understand if we're talking about for the emergency operations plan or just communication and engagement planning in general.
Communications, crisis management. The reason I'm homing in on it is because he took great care to indicate that for other areas, there is in fact a plan already in place. And I'm asking the question because what I've heard from some of our neighbors is quite a bit of concern about communications, how they were able to learn what was getting ready to happen next, what to expect, and what had happened. So I'm wondering, is there an emergency management, a crisis management communications plan already in place?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful because there are plans on two levels. There's a general communication, a crisis communication protocol that we follow. And we know that that also needs to be updated, which is going to be part of the emergency operation plan that we just spoke about previously. So to update that, make sure that we know what all of our mediums are, who our contacts are in those areas, and see what new and best practices have been developed since the last time we had that protocol together. So yes, we have a general protocol that we follow. And then for specific projects and initiatives, we have a more in-depth communication plan that's done for them, which is what I believe Mr. Woody was speaking about. And that's where we're really digging into, who is most impacted by this project. In the case of the EOP rehaul, we'll be spending a lot of time understanding where our most vulnerable populations are, what their preferred methods of communication are, and then adding to that database. So I guess it's a yes and. Yes, we have a general protocol, and we want to make sure for specific incidents and projects that we go even deeper than our typical protocol where we bring in a number of people and we're making sure that we are communicating across a number of mediums and then reaching into our neighborhoods to help amplify any messaging that we need to get out. Did that answer the question?
It did, and I'm going to take that a little bit further, and I guess this is for you. Is there a communications plan for our finding out?
Yeah, with the internal communication piece of it.
I would say not formally. It's intuitive that we know that we need to communicate with you all. Sometimes it is an issue of timing. Should we communicate with you and most of the time we try to do that when we have enough information.
Yeah, and one of our struggles is, we're already hearing from folks about an issue that you all are trying to gather information about.
Yeah.
And I would offer, this is probably the second kind of emergency moment that I have experienced with the city, and I think where we struggle and what I'd like to see us address in our emergency communication is certainly the internal piece. I think, you've been without an assistant city managers for a while, and now you have two great assistant city managers that are still kind of learning all their departments and figuring everything out, but it's a great time for us to kind of nail down that internal communication piece. But also, it's a struggle when something happens on a weekend or a holiday or an evening. The other piece, I think, where I've noticed we have this conversation and that is a challenge for us is at what point does it trigger an emergency communication effort? Correct. Is this an emergency yet? Do we need to have a press conference? Do we need to set up a regular schedule of communication for the next 3-4 days, a week, whatever? And on this one, it seemed like it wasn't clearly recognized yet that it was going to be a full-blown emergency. It sort of simmered at first, and then it, became apparent. And compounding that, of course, the city was, had regular staff out, pulled lots of people back in to work on this, but, it was, some people were away, and, we always have staff on call, always covered 24/7 with staff on call, so that's not, but, if you've got folks that have traveled who aren't the staff on call, but you're going to need them back anyway, it can be a challenge. So I don't know how you get to a place where you have, I'm not a communications crisis emergency management, whatever, expert, how to manage that, but I feel like that is that has been the bigger challenge, is trying to figuring out when did this cross the line? When do we need to enact all of these measures? And that was just an observation that I had going through this experience.
Just kind of on this theme too, just digesting, hearing from the public, and as we all continue to just kind of learn what's been going on and how we can improve. I think this last part of the conversation about when council, when something rises to a council conversation, I think it's really important, not even in a cover ourselves, but in we're leaders for this team and we can be of use. And so I think having us as when I've looked at emergency management plans before, there's often target audiences and when does audience A get in reach with audience B, right? And we do that with our neighborhood advisory committees or our neighborhood contacts. And I think incorporating your elected leaders as one of the audiences in those scenario plans, I think would be really valuable, so that, because people don't have relationships in the water department, but they might have a relationship with us. So they come to us for those resources, and we don't want to give them stale information or be out of date, and we want to serve.
On that note, I've really wondered about this. If we were a really large city, if we were Washington, D.C. or New York City, you would not count on, your council members pushing out information, right? Mm-hmm. So at what point are you a city that's large enough that you need to have institutionalized methods of communicating with the public rather than depending, I saw Mayor Zeb Smathers of Canton, they had a water outage, and he posted on his Facebook page, and I'm pretty sure every person who lives in Canton is Zeb Smathers' Facebook page friend, so he's able to communicate directly to them. But I think that we,
I will say, though, that, and this is just a personal preference, in my role as a policymaker, I don't want to be the one communicating an operational issue. So while I'm not in Canton, even if I were in Canton.
right, no, I agree. But you might you want to know all the information because people are reaching out to you, but operationally, we have a manager form of government, yeah.
And then just the second thread on this is, I've seen when there's some of these templates that there's just like scheduling. So I think part of where I was hearing folks really anxious and nervous was they were having to make a decision if they were going to get a hotel night or leave, and they didn't know when they were going to hear next. And so if we can kind of maybe look at some of those matrices of decisions around timing and communications and look at if there's timelines that can be built into those protocols of press releases every day or
In terms of the schedule of like, you can expect your next update, yeah.
predictability in the emergency response communications, I think would be valuable.
And I think we heard a lot from folks that said, you aren't doing a good job communicating, I'm not getting communications, and I think we've seen there was a massive amount of communication, but what wasn't communicated was, when can you expect your water to come back on? And that's really all anybody wanted to hear, and that was the critical piece we weren't able to communicate with accuracy. And so unfortunately, is there a way that we could improve the technology in the system so we have more real-time information to be able to say, okay, we're recharging the system, we know that this neighborhood will come back online at this time or that time. But we did not, we have updated the technology and we do have what's called smart meters now, but it seems like there are more advancements that may be possible, and you're nodding your head, so I assume you already know this to be the case.
I would say that in addition to what you've offered, that folks did want more frequent communication. What it seemed the expectation would be is like a tracking bar from a delivery of a package. Here, we're looking for a part, the part is being delivered, the part is being installed. Like, those are the details of operations that we shouldn't be communicating, but there's some sort of way for us, I think, to have more often communication was also deeply anticipated, and that seemed to be a disappointment.
But I also wonder how much that type of communication is hindered by our topography. So I feel that people, what they hate more than hearing nothing is hearing something and then you overpromise and underperform.
And so are you saying it might have been impossible to provide this?
I wonder if it's impossible.
Yeah, I've wondered it too, if we could, that's why I asked the question around technology. Is it possible to advance the technology so we can provide?
Sure, and there's 2 points. One is the details of an operations like a tracking bar, but the second part is frequency. Even if we only had the same information, I think like an expectation of every 8 hours or every 12 hours, there were big lags of time where folks were like, where do I get information? What do you mean you're waiting until tomorrow? It felt like for the people who were most impacted, even if they had the same information, having verifiable, accurate, and more frequent information seemed like the trifecta.
Yeah, I agree that, I think, again, I've said this before, I think the expectation for customers is that, and I'm saying water customers, is that they have an experience like they do when there's a power outage. And Duke Energy is texting your phone, and even if your power's not back on, they're continuing to text your phone. So they're saying, we know your power's still out, we're still working on it. We know your power's still out, we're still working on it. And you're getting that regular touch so that you don't feel like someone's forgotten about your situation.
And I know we're going to talk about this with the committee makeup in a minute, but I think that we also have to honor that there were commercial and residential customers that are not the primary contact for water, whether there's multiple people in a household or renters.
Yes.
You might have, whether it's an apartment building or even a family, or there's a lot of reasons why people weren't getting any information. So that's why they were looking to the organization for more holistic, whether it's press releases or Facebook posts and multiple language. There was a need for more.
Yes, we have whole communities that might have one water tap but
Right.
they have multiple customers within that
Okay.
water tap because, it's utilities are included or whatever the case may be.
And one of the things that I think we learned is that we were pretty conservative in terms of, again, not overpromising and under-delivering. At times, we just didn't have enough information that we felt comfortable putting out that information, and that's why, in terms of being conservative, maybe we just should have pushed the same message every 2 or 3 hours. We also, I think, went out on a limb and said, your water will be on in 24 to 48 hours. And we did not meet that 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel good, y'all. It really didn't feel good, and I'm certain it didn't feel good to our customers. You made this promise, where's my water? I can't tell you, well, you all know how many emails you got. Where's my water? But again, lesson learned. And I know we're taking a lot of time on this particular presentation, and we apologize, but it's a really important issue for the community.
Yeah, I think that one of the things Mayor, you mentioned about we're still with you, that's what I think people expected, is like, whether it was the Councilwoman Turner did ask, can we put something on our own public access television? Like something public facing that's like, we're still here with you, we've got like 6 to 8 hour updates, even if it's the same information, you're waiting for your tap to turn on and we're waiting with you. It's like something that was clearly anticipated, and I think you might hit the nail on the head.
I also want to say, Mayor, you're referencing, folks kind of have the experience of Duke Energy as their power company, so they have a communications expectation of frequency and the information that's being shared. And I want to share that, like, Nashville does that too for their water, right? So, like, what I find really hopeful for the future, because this situation stunk. It was terrible for everyone without water, and it's an opportunity for us to just get better and better at improving, is that the good news is we are not cutting brand new trail for water utilities in the world. This type of real-time communication about meter information is possible. It will take investments, and we need to look at that based on what we learn, but I really think that we can continue having better information through technology in our water system, so that if and when just one meter goes out on your street, or we have something more substantial, that the information coming out is what people want. Because I think that's part of it too. Even had we done every type of communication best practice possible, and I know we did a lot of them, we weren't able to say, hey, Maggie, your water's coming on within 32 hours. But we just didn't have that data yet. And so I want us to really race towards an outcome by investing so that we can have that information whenever any service goes out.
Well, and I'll be curious to see what comes out of the committee's review, if this is possible under these circumstances. We already do real time, we text people, if we're gonna have a planned water outage, because we're gonna replace a pipe or something, we do send people text messages, and we say, this is gonna happen, and this is what you should expect, and that's generally what happens. And you get a text, your water's back on, and et cetera, and so forth. But this issue where you lose pressure in this large of a portion of your system and you have to recharge it, I'll be glad if there's technology that can help us get more accurate about when your water's restored.
But we didn't. There's a lot we could learn. Like, I don't know that we have a clear number of how many actual households lost their water.
Right.
Like,
No.
that data, I think, would make
Sure.
the tracking bar more effective, because, there's 20 of you without water. We're 2% of the way to reaching the goal of restoring all of your water. We
Right.
didn't have that information, so I hear what you're saying, but
Yeah.
I think investing in the best information technology for our utility is in our best interest as we keep adapting to
Right,
it.
I mean, I hear your point. So even if you couldn't provide a time, if you could say, this many customers didn't have water, this many customers now have water, you would at least be able to kind of extrapolate from that, that you're likely to get it within
Yeah.
whatever time period. Thanks for indulging us in our
no.
conversation. You've got more to present. Go ahead.
I'm almost to the end. That was a great discussion, and we appreciate that and already the feedback that we're hearing. So to finish out my portion of the presentation, on January 3rd, City Council at a press conference announced their intention to establish an independent review committee, and so that is the item that is before you tonight. There is a resolution attached to the council agenda. City staffs continue to update this resolution to reflect council's intended purpose and goal for this committee. And so what I'd like to do real quick, for those that haven't read the resolution, want to share some of the key takeaways from that resolution. And then, of course, that'll be on council. It'll be your action to then, through that resolution, establish this independent review committee. So first, just to take a second to talk over, a few minutes to talk about the scope. The independent review committee is going to be responsible for a number of things. One is to review the water outage and provide a comprehensive account of that event, so to kind of understand what happened, to assess the city's operational emergency response and communication efforts, so the way that the city responded and worked through that event as it unfolded. And then the committee will also review and analyze infrastructure needs, identify policy and process changes, improve communicate or make an assessment of how we could improve in communication, emergency response, and mitigation processes. And all this work is done, and these analysis occurs with the goal of maximizing our ability to prevent such a crisis in the future. And that's really the scope of the committee as it exists or is proposed in the resolution. In terms of committee composition, what is proposed right now is a 9-member multidisciplinary committee. Those 9 members will have various backgrounds. Right now we've proposed, or council's proposed, 2 residential water customers, 1 commercial water customer, 1 emergency response professional, 2 communications professionals, and 3 subject matter experts in public water systems. That would be the proposed composition of the committee. That appointment process would include 2 appointments to be made by the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners. That's because, as we've covered earlier, portions of the water system are outside of the city of Asheville and exist in Buncombe County, and even, I think, some in Henderson County. So it's a very large water system. And then the remaining appointments, so the other 7 will be made by the city council.
Can we pause on that?
Yes.
I understood that we were also going to ask for the county to consider an emergency response because of our partnership on this. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I asked them to do that, and they asked for some flexibility on their appointments, but I will reiterate to them that that would be helpful considering their role in the emergency management piece.
And the other part of this is that when it was first presented to us in the check-ins, it was just 1 residential, and I am really glad to see that it's 2, because of the number of people who may not have gotten the alert because they weren't the primary contact as the water customer. I'm thinking specifically of commercial and residential renters, and who disproportionately pay per gallon for water because they aren't offered a bulk discount. So I think it's really important to have the residential represented. And I realize there may be some Venn diagram overlap where you have a commercial water customer who's also a residential customer.
Yep. Yeah, I think the makeup and the resolution establishing this committee has evolved based on feedback from council as we've gotten to this point tonight. So a little bit of a timeline, and this is really, I think, for the public and people watching, and just to put this out. So we're here tonight at January 10th, and through this resolution and by your action, council can establish that committee tonight. We are proposing, would like to see that the city council then appoints their committee members on January 24th. So that is your next council meeting. That's a really quick turnaround. I think the county commission would then appoint their members at their February 7th meeting, at which point we would have the membership would then be able to formally establish this independent review committee. And what we're asking is in that first 30 days is for that committee to begin their analysis, come back in 30 days and share an update with this body on their findings. So that puts us back in front of council in mid to late March, depending on how quickly we get the committee established. And then the greater charge, the larger charge, is then within 90 days, the committee would provide a final written report and presentation to city council. So that means, again, mid to late May, we'd like to have this independent review committee provide a final report to this body. And I am going to step away for this is the conclusion of my presentation. I'll give council some space to discuss, but I do want to make two final statements. I want to, again, echo Ms. Campbell's comments earlier, and I want to apologize to our residents, to our businesses, to our customers for the inconvenience that we know this caused. And I also want to take a second just to recognize and thank our city employees that actually throughout this incident worked hard to restore water service to this community. And with that, I'm going to sit down and I can come back up if you have any questions.
Pause.
Thank you.
I have a question I think that you might be the right person for. What happens between now and March if we have freezing temperatures? Do we feel confident that we're ready to mitigate this winter's potential situation, or there's not going to be one? Like,
I feel confident. I have a lot of confidence in our water staff, and I think they are well underway in ensuring we don't experience this again. And I want to give confidence to our community that that's going to be the case. Now, things happen. There's always unpredictable events, but I feel very confident that our staff is making preparations to ensure the likelihood of this happening again is almost zero.
Maybe.
Well, I just wanted to.
The zero piece, I want to caution us again, don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but we have, on a daily basis, we have water line breaks, almost on a daily basis. What we are hoping is that we don't have the complexities of really, really cold weather for several days. We think that we are doing all of the upgrades that are needed to hopefully protect our system. And I think we'll definitely have learned in terms of response. And Mayor, I apologize.
Yeah, no, well, thank you, first of all, to all the people who emailed us the historical weather data for Asheville for the last 100 years. So there's a few people that did that. And one thing that I found interesting, the Mills River plant, which is at issue here, came online in the 90s, and we actually haven't had a prolonged period of cold, apparently, that we just experienced since Mills River came online, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the weather history that people have provided us. So hopefully we were taking necessary steps and ensure it won't happen again. And hopefully we also, I mean, we can't count on not experiencing extreme cold weather because that's probably likely to happen again. For this portion, so at the conclusion of this part, we're going to need a motion to create this committee. That'll be the action that council needs to take. And we do have a number of people who are signed up to speak. So council, you tell me if you're comfortable with the motion now. What we would do for at this part of the agenda is hear the motion first, and while the motion's pending, then we'll hear public comment on this item. So if anybody wants to go ahead and make that motion in a second, then we can open up the public comment. But if there is further discussion before we do that, please, this would be the time.
I just have one more thing. I see several water department staff in the back of the room. And I just want to say, I am frustrated that this happened in our community, and I can also be really grateful at the same time. I know that this meant time away from your families during the holiday. I know that this meant nights, and I know that after water was restored, you haven't stopped because you're doing preparedness work. So despite the frustration I feel that this happened and the desire to never happen again, I can also feel deeply grateful. I see you, and I really appreciate it.
Maggie, thank you so much for highlighting that. And, you know, you guys are a great team. You work together really well. There wasn't any shouting. There wasn't anybody throwing anything. I mean, just a lot of determined work to get through it. So that was pretty remarkable to witness. You know, this is very challenging because we are grateful. We know that there are people that experienced a water outage for a week some people up to a week, which is just, I went through it with kids when I was in 2004, when the city lost water in the back-to-back hurricanes, and it's a real challenge to endure, but I'm thankful that we have so many folks that are here willing to work in our water department and make sure we get our water back and back online and running well.
And you know what? I do have a question, and I should have said something. Can I ask it of you very, very briefly, David?
Yes, good, yeah.
You, David. No, it's not a rough one. I also heard from members of the community, there is the notion that this happened as a result of development in our area. Can you discuss our current water capacity and the degree to which development, continued development, did or did not play a role in this issue?
I can take a stab at it, at least with
Like,
capacity.
how is our capacity, what's our capacity at this point?
Our
And did that have
capacity-
anything? Do you see what I'm saying?
He fit,
Well, I don't need to know the exact number. I'm just saying.
Well, on our average day, which typically we're pretty flat, it's 21 and a half is our average for a yearly average per day. We may get up to 22, 23, 24. There's bumps throughout the day, based on demand. But we're at about half our rated capacity now.
So when you say half of the regular capacity,
fit-
we could do twice as much as we're doing now, as far as,
In theory.
in theory. Okay.
Yeah, I think we are fortunate. We own our own watershed property. It's about 20,000 acres, and we have these 3 water production facilities. We're enviable in terms of our water capacity, and I think when people talk about infrastructure too, in terms of growth that we're experiencing, it's the pipes in the ground and the tanks and the whole system that you've got to maintain. I think our infrastructure challenge has been more around the older parts of the system, I would guess. Because the newer pieces are new.
Yeah, and before anybody is allowed to hook onto the system or be hooked onto the system, we do, for a residential, we do a pressure test. And we make sure, we have to ensure that we can serve that customer. And it's basically the same process for a commercial customer. It just involves hydrants and a lot more flow.
Okay.
But those are done up front to make sure we have the capacity.
And we also have a technical review committee that looks at all those pieces of development to make sure all that's in place. So we do get a lot of questions around that. So people need to know we have that review piece of it.
And my understanding too is that there's, providing clean water is really regulated. There's a lot of extremely detailed technical knowledge from the federal government and the state government to ensure that there's consistency of this important resource. And so these layers that we're talking about of like developmental review, project by project, actual folks going out into the field and doing tests on the system, that all ties into a regulatory framework that says if we are starting to reach a threshold, like if we're at 80%.
That's correct.
Can you talk to that threshold? Because I'm going to botch the technicals, but essentially if we can fill a pie chart fully with our water, I'm going to mess it up. Talk to it, because when we talked about that earlier, that really helped me understand that as we grow, there are triggers at the federal level that are overseeing our work to ensure that we start going to expansion planning of our production facilities and our infrastructure.
Sure, to add on what you were saying, once we get to 80% of our capacity, we have to start design to expand.
Okay.
To keep that, what we call it a safe yield.
So is there a way to communicate and follow up to what my colleagues have offered, what role the Mills River facility does in increasing our capacity? Because if that's regularly having issues or offline in a situation like this, is it artificially adding to our capacity? Is it probably a question that goes along with folks asking about the capacity for development?
No, it's got a rated capacity of 7.5. I've had so many numbers over the last week.
So
they're
that
getting all
facility
jumbled.
doesn't add to our capacity?
It does, and it's all three plants added together makes our total capacity. Now, each plant has its own rated capacity, but all three are added together for the total system capacity.
In other words, we need Mills River
We did,
plant.
yes.
Otherwise, we are closer to our capacity that would result in a trigger.
That's true.
That's the story I kind of need to know more about,
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, but it's on a temporary basis. Like I said before, if it's offline for maintenance or upgrades or things like that, it's temporary.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so any questions regarding, we need a motion for the committee piece of it before I can take public comment. Does anyone want to make that motion? or-
There's no staff report.
There's no staff report linked to this agenda.
So could I just read the top part? Okay. I can make a motion
Okay.
for a resolution establishing an independent review committee focused on reviewing the water outage in order to assess infrastructure needs and the city's response, and to determine what can be done to maximize prevention and improve response efforts for future events.
Okay. She can second it. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna, then we've got a few people signed up to speak under this item. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and watch the lights on the lectern, and when the buzzer goes, then your time is done. The first person signed up to speak is Bill Robinson.
Good evening. My name is Bill Robinson. I'm an award-winning journalist, a longtime entrepreneur, a father, a grandfather, and an Asheville resident. I live in South Asheville in a building that is a HUD-subsidized, a rather large HUD-subsidized apartment building for the elderly and the disabled. Lots of very elderly people there. And so I'm here to talk about the impact that it had on my friends and neighbors, and myself too, but mainly my friends and neighbors. This isn't a luxury water, right? It's a utility much like air. And if we were to suddenly undergo a loss of air, imagine the suffering there. This is kind of different even than that. At least it would be a quick death if we lost air. With this was suffering that went on for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, we were out of water 5 or 6 days. If I'm not mistaken, if next door is any gauge, and I think it's a really good gauge, and I hope the city has somebody monitoring it constantly and really taking tips and understanding better what's going on from it, there were people out of water for 10 days or more. There may still be people out of water right now. I'm not sure that that's not true. I think I saw somebody yesterday complaining about it. So, you know, this is water is a necessity. This isn't a disturbance during the holidays. It's not a minor inconvenience or even a major inconvenience. This is a betrayal of the public trust. This is a public health crisis. Now, the heroes in this situation were the fire department. You can't imagine what it meant to have firemen bringing over bottled drinking water to the elderly, how heartwarming that was. And another hero is Councilwoman Roney, who was over there. I didn't see anybody else from this room over there in our apartment complex with a clipboard over the holidays, taking notes and asking people questions about how hard it was and what they were having to go through. That was quite amazing. Really blew me away. So, you know, as a journalist and a writer, we're often accused of burying the lead. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to take my closing and move it right up to the front in my commentary, which is what's really ominous, what's really alarming is that nobody's saying it won't happen again. And even when the mayor just led the witness to say what happens if in March we go through a cold snap, still, nobody's even, you know, painting a rosy picture about it. And I'm not even talking about just having, you know, rose-colored shades about the process and the water system here. I'm talking about having the intention to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because it's only through having that intention that it won't happen.
Thank you.
So,
Raylan Allen?
Thank you. My name is Raylan Allen, and I'm a proud homeowner and community member of West Asheville. I weathered the storm in my hometown of Rochester, New York, which is 65 miles east of Buffalo, New York, where the storm was the most deadly. I'm here to talk about my career. I spent 10 years in affordable housing and homelessness, and the last 5 in emergency management. Some of the language that's missing tonight is recovery and emergency management. I started my career in the Lake Ontario flood relief efforts, worked on Hurricane Maria response in Puerto Rico, Hurricane Michael and Irma recovery in Florida, and I also worked on COVID-19 response across New York City, Arkansas, Maryland, Illinois, and Connecticut. Currently, I support Hurricanes Ian and Nicole in Florida. I have lived experience with the ice storm of 91 in Western New York and Tropical Storm Henry and deadly Hurricane Ida in New York City. While I fully support the formation of an independent review committee, I see 2 gaping holes in the proposed composition. The first is intentionally to include our rental population, as they don't have the same access to resources and communication as homeowners. The second is adding an emergency management disaster recovery specialist, subject matter expert to this composition. While the inclusion of emergency response is vital, disaster recovery or response is only 1/4 of emergency management. Response, recovery, preparedness, and mitigation are the 4 pillars. So I ask the council to consider an emergency management specialist in either recovery, mitigation, or preparedness to this team, as well as think towards equity and not to exclude our renters.
Judy Dale?
My name is Judy Bell, and I'm a lifelong resident in South Asheville. Never having experienced water outage like this. I was out for 6 days. My son actually brought me water from Charlotte because we couldn't find it. And then Ingalls, when you could find it, they went up on the price. My opinion is the south end is growing rapidly. And this is, a lot of these things have been improved, increasing tax base, but the infrastructure has not been worked on to handle all this. We've even got another big apartment complex going on in Sweden Creek. And that's just my personal opinion, and I wanted to express it. And as far as these task forces go, I'm a retired city employee. I've seen these task forces formed, and they make recommendations, and then they're just pushed to the side. Recommendations aren't taken care of. I just don't want to see that happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Burns?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. My name is Chris Burns. I'm here with Tommy Lauder, and we're here representing Congressman Chuck Edwards. Like you, he's received many, many phone calls, emails, snail mail letters over the course of the last week and a half, 2 weeks, both as a member of the Senate, North Carolina Senate, and now as our congressman. And we just want to, first I would like to say, thank you, Ms. Campbell. You've been very responsive in terms of answering our questions and getting information back. And the congressman wanted me to relay on to you that he is very interested to continue to hear what you're going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again and the answers of what caused it. I know looking at your faces and your questions and your eyes as this presentation was made over the last hour and a half, you guys still have a lot of the same questions that our residents and constituents have. So I thank you for what you're doing, and we look forward to hearing more over the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. Nina Tovish?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'd first of all like to start by expressing my appreciation as well for those who are out in the cold, fighting unknown situation and circumstances around the holidays, and the sacrifices and the efforts they made in an attempt to restore services. I'm grateful for that. Those frontline folks deserve a lot of praise for their efforts. I'm also pleased that Council is establishing a review committee for this particular crisis. But I'd like to emphasize that I think it's really important that we be assured as a public that the city is out in front on emergency preparedness, not only around our water system, but around any number of potential serious crises that could affect the health and safety of our population. Wildfires, other extreme weather events, toxic contaminations of one kind or another, heaven forbid, some kind of terrorist event. There are all sorts of ways that people could be at serious danger, and we need to know that our city has robust plans in place to deal with each one of these kinds of crises. It is my hope that the committee's work will provide you at least some categorical templates for how to respond better along all the different axes that we've discussed so far this evening, so that there are plans in place for communication, for remediation, for neighborhood coordination, for maintaining and then distribution of basic supplies, and ultimately often accessibility of emergency shelter in the case of some kind of disaster. Frankly, at the moment, I am not filled with confidence that the city is prepared to deal with the broad spectrum of potential truly catastrophic events that might take place here. And I think as citizens and residents, we deserve to know that the city has fully planned for and put in the materials and the management that we need to make sure that we can address those situations if and when they arise. Frankly, given how important healthful water is to folks, we're kind of lucky nobody died in this particular crisis. And who knows, maybe somebody did. Let's make sure that we have plans in place so that next time around, everyone is safe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Jonathan Wainscott.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wainscott, and I'd like to thank all the boots on the ground that kept everything going. We're trying to get it back online as quickly as possible. I know that there's a lot of search for blame in this, and you know, as one of the harshest critics in town, you might think that that's coming from me. I'm having a hard time finding any single place to blame. I mean, this is an unbelievable, I guess, weather anomaly. I used to live in Chicago before I moved here, and 0-degree temperatures are no joke. And we do have an old infrastructure problem. To me, this isn't a water problem, it's a money problem. And we talked about our legislative agenda tonight. Maybe you could explain to everybody the unique law that Asheville is under, whereby we can't charge the extra rate outside of the city limits as a prudent business. I hear all the time, why don't you run the government a little bit more like a business? And that's a prudent business thing to do, and we're not allowed to do that. And we're the only city in the state, I believe, that this pertains to. So this special treatment of Asheville, if you want to take that back to Chuck Edwards and you want a little cooperation from the higher ups, you know, why don't you get off our neck with that, you know? How are we going to, it's not that we don't have great plans, we just don't have the money to put in the plans. We got copious amounts of fresh water. Down in Mills River, you can tap a hole in the ground and pull up water from an ancient glacial aquifer, which is what Sierra Nevada did. Of course, if Nestle did that, we'd be up in arms about it, but we don't talk about the brewery industry and how much water they're taking up. New Belgium pays half of what we do. I mean, I got a lot of gripes about the water situation, but you know, I don't blame council for this. I don't blame the mayor for this. I know that people want information right now because we're all on Amazon Prime and, we want everything right now. And sometimes the answer is, I don't know, and I don't want to be overpromised and told that the water's going to be on tomorrow. If it's not, you don't know. It's just a pretty unfortunate situation. But, we're spending $10 million a year on the water improvement. I don't think that it's not that we're not spending any money. We just don't have enough. And it's not that you aren't spending enough attention on this. I mean, you got to pay attention to pickleball too. We got all these other things that everybody wants right now. And, the humanitarian crisis of the water being turned off. I mean, I've had that happen in my life. I've been to blame for that, and that's really no fun also. But we lord over everybody. If you can't pay your trash bill, the stormwater fee, I use $28 worth of water, which requires $30 worth of sewage maintenance. My bill is $127 a month, and we will turn it off. We'll turn off your water, so that's kind of thuggish in my opinion. But thanks for all that you've done. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, belated, and thanks for all that you've been doing.
Thank you. Grace Barron Martinez.
I'm glad to see you're doing this after action report and the formation of this commission. And I've been really encouraged by some of the great questions you've asked here so far and that my neighbors have asked here tonight. I'd also like to take the time to acknowledge that the last after action report that the city put together failed to mention severe injuries that the police inflicted in the summer of 2020. Understandably, the community has lost a lot of trust in the things that you all say you'll do. Basic communications were lacking throughout this process, and it took 2 full days before the city even acknowledged that it was happening. I was on the ground working with local mutual aid, which, by the way, is currently being criminalized by the cops in your city. And I heard the stories of folks who are experiencing the crisis because getting water in people's hands was the #1 priority. I talked to families, elderly folks, disabled people, and Spanish speakers. I heard lots of residents in the Shiloh community who have come to expect being ignored as they were at your press conferences. I talked to one resident in the Western region who felt he was being forgotten and described himself as an endangered species. I asked for the city's help with water supply for our outreach efforts to no avail. I was watching live updates of the maps, knowing they were inaccurate as neighbors were coming through to tell me they had no water, a trickle, or brown water after we were told that the city had fully restored water and was no longer under a boil advisory. I heard from people who told me they didn't even know there was a boil advisory because the communication was so poor, with some even being sickened by the water. Meanwhile, the hotels welcomed tourists and we were being asked to conserve. Breweries kept brewing their beer instead of bottling water for the people, all while paying less than residential customers and far less than the national average for their water. Failure to pay a residential water bill can get your home disconnected from a life-sustaining resource within 2 weeks of non-payment, yet the city can freely fail to provide water to customers for 2 weeks. Will people be compensated for lost water and wages? Disasters will continue to happen as the climate changes and late-stage capitalism roars forward. This is our new normal, and we must be planning for more to come. I'm deeply appreciative of the work of city workers. I'm thankful to the neighbors who helped us all get through this. The spirit of community here is alive and well. And without that, I'm sure more people would have been left behind. Your communications must be in Spanish at a minimum. We served so many Spanish speakers who were systematically excluded from this important information. These meetings should also include translators every single time. Please don't let this process become another stunt to make the city management look good with no change. Community members need an honest accounting and a new emergency plan that centers serving immediate needs and our most vulnerable community members. I'd also like to remind my neighbors of how much our existing networks and love for one another can keep us safe when the city's systems fail to do so. So let's plan with one another in our neighborhoods in preparation for the next crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Hudson.
Okay. Hey, y'all. Okay, first and foremost, clean, potable water is the first priority in a water outage. I don't mean to sound infantilizing with my tone here, but I want to be super duper clear that our water pipes are not the only way to get clean water to citizens and customers. You also need to have a backup plan of what your trucks coming in, what your grocery stores, what your local mutual aid groups and nonprofit groups are going to do. That's part of our city water map. It extends beyond the pipes. We need to have solid plans in place of how we are bringing in additional water if our infrastructure fails. Next, stopgap measures are more important than updates on the process of fixing it. We need the stopgap measures to stop the gap. All weather extremes could cause issues, and weather events are getting more extreme, more unpredictable, and more frequent in instances. We're having a higher frequency. We're going to see more mudslides. We're going to see more floods and infrastructure fails and significant changes in temperature. Like in the past, we've had these cold temperatures, but it wasn't as rapidly onset as it was this time. Like we're going to have those weird mountain winters to more extremes in the future. That point is to say we need a meteorologist or climatologist on this committee to examine whether we need to be preparing for a higher occupancy. And how what I'm saying is we need to plan for worse than the worst because the baseline is changing. We're not going to be able to just come into compliance and think that that is enough. We need to be planning proactively, and that includes making our occupancy include hotels at full capacity and residents having their families in for the holidays. We need to be able to serve at maximum capacity at a minimum. As a Christmas time brewing tourist town, we must weatherize according to max actual occupancy. Finally, we trust the city with our water rights at the cost of our self-sufficiency, which we would have. We trust you with our water rights, and we need those water rights back if we cannot trust you with them. What I mean by that is the legal right to collect your own rainwater, use your own water treatment systems at point of use, and put less burden on the larger infrastructure. We need to think about future-proofing our city.
Thank you. Kim Murphy?
This is the little green light.
Oh.
There it goes. All right. So anyhow, I'm not here to cast blame. I'm here because I actually want to serve on this committee. I'm an urban farmer in West Asheville, and I sell at a couple of different tailgates, and some of my farmer friends were negatively impacted by this far worse than I was. I'm concerned that there aren't enough people on this committee. I know that that's what I'm hearing from a lot of other people. I have a background in working in an aquatic toxicology lab. We do have issues whenever we have unreliable water and unreliable sanitation. As far as biological issues, I don't see anyone fulfilling that role on this committee, and I would like to see that. And that's really all I have to say. Oh, and also I would like to thank Sage Turner because she showed up in Candler, and she didn't have to because she's city council, but she came out of the city, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, council, those are the folks that we have signed up to speak on this matter, and I do actually appreciate, I don't know if Jonathan already left, but one thing, we haven't talked about this in a long time, just to note before we talk about this committee, Asheville does have a long history of political water wars, I will say, whether long ago it was between the city and the county when there used to be a water authority, and the termination of that authority resulted in a lawsuit, which wasn't the first lawsuit over the water system. But as a result, Asheville is under some unique restraints with regard to how it funds its water system. In the rest of the state, cities that have water systems charge a differential rate for customers outside the city limits than within the city limits. And whether you think that's fair or not, that's the practice, and that is used to, I believe the thinking there is that customers outside the city limits aren't also paying city property taxes. Thus, a differential rate is charged, and those funds are used to fund the capital needs and repairs and maintenance of the water system. Asheville has local legislation that restricts that. We cannot charge a differential rate to customers outside the city limits, which, you know, I'm not saying whether that's good or that's bad from a fairness standpoint. I'm merely pointing out that it is a limitation on the revenue collection to help fund the system. More importantly, one of the bigger deals for Asheville is that we have, normally, if you have a water system in the state of North Carolina, is that a hint, Maggie? If you have a water system and somebody builds a subdivision or an apartment outside the city limits, if they want municipal water, they have to come into the city limits. They have to be annexed into the city if the city wants it. The city may not want it for various reasons, but it's called a voluntary annexation, which is sort of ironic because it's not exactly voluntary, but it means that as a city's water system grows, so does its city limits, and therefore also its tax base to support its entire city. Again, there is local legislation that restricts Asheville uniquely from requiring this. So you see neighborhoods like Biltmore Lake, for example, or the Ramble, or other apartment complexes in South Asheville, actually even extending into Arden and down into northern Henderson County, which are not in the city limits of Asheville and don't pay property taxes to the city of Asheville, but Asheville provides water to those folks and businesses and residents. So we haven't talked about this in a long time. That legislation was passed some time ago. And additionally, the water system, and this is a good thing, I think, we also have local legislation that does not allow us to transfer our water revenue outside of the water fund to fund the rest of the city operations. This is a bad practice that happens a lot in some communities where they use their utilities to subsidize their general fund because it is a revenue maker. And so there's a temptation to use those funds to supplement other non-revenue generating functions of a city, if that makes any sense. It's not a good idea to do it. When I was in my master's in public administration a zillion years ago, we were always taught don't transfer your enterprise funds to supplement your general fund, specifically with regard to utilities. So, but we do have that restriction, and I want to make that clear too, because I've heard at least one person say, well, are you using your water revenues to improve your water system? And the answer is yes. And I think you saw in the presentation tonight, the 5-year capital plan is over $70 million. And this is an ongoing project. Now, one point of history, when this system was governed by an authority between the city and the county were allowed to use monies from the water system to supplement funds. I believe it was up to 5% each. Also, both bodies, the city and the county, which predate us and all existing county commissioners, had to approve the budget for the water system. And I understand that there were a lot of conflicts over decisions about putting money and investing in the system to maintain it. And so it is fair to say that for a period of years, and I see some nodding of those who know this history, the system was not properly maintained, and so we're playing a lot of catch up. But the good news is, for the last several years, we have been doing a lot of catch up and making significant investments. Just completed the North Fork Reservoir project, which was around $38.5 million. So significant investments are being made into the system to play catch up. And as a lot of people know, there are parts of it that are quite antiquated. So I hope that casts some light. Once again, we're sort of doing the best job we can do with our fiscal arm tied behind our back, if that makes any sense. So, you have to balance what customers can reasonably pay for water service with the needs to invest in the system. And I think we're always working on striking that balance within the constraints that we have to operate under from a legal standpoint. And I'm sure anyone who comes to these meetings all the time is absolutely tired of hearing about legislative restrictions to how we do our business, but it is what it is. So you missed it, Jonathan. I was highlighting some of the points you were making during your speech. Thank you. All right, so I just hope that's some helpful history and context about what we're doing here. And with that, we have a motion before us to approve the creation of a committee consisting of 9 members. The county will appoint 2 of the members to it. And any other questions or comments before we
I
vote?
do have a curiosity around, if we could back up to, are we missing an opportunity to make sure we have a disaster specialist explicitly named?
And Chief, you may want to speak to this. I think the description we have here was trying to tie into the system we're using in Buncombe County in terms of emergency management.
Yeah, I think that it would be impossible to have somebody that, I mean, those are so that disaster management, emergency preparedness are the same discipline. So I think that would absolutely capture those concerns with that representative.
And if we had emergency response / disaster specialist and we had multiple applicants, could we then discern that differently? Can we widen the bucket to hopefully catch?
So on the last paragraph of the first page where it says 1 emergency response professional, instead it would say 1 emergency response / disaster.
That would be my friendly amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there's not an emergency responder that's also not an expert in disaster preparedness. They go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other because
I've seen the list of certifications. It's,
yes.
But I think for explaining the role is that person would fulfill, we could add the descriptor to the resolution. Brad?
I like that
Brad,
amendment.
did you get that?
Because I think what it helps us do is like, when we're looking at resumes, someone who is like, hey, I was in this, and this disaster that were similar would give us some context as opposed to folks who are doing different emergency responses. I like it. It's a ramble.
I'm still hoping the county will be the one to appoint this position, but maybe we'll see. But this will help them as well. Any other tweaks or concerns? I know the temptation is to make this committee larger and larger and larger because we can think of so many folks that have a lot to contribute to a committee like this. So I empathize with the desire to make it bigger. I'm also very concerned that it be agile and be able to move quickly and bring reports back to us. And I know that's incredibly difficult to do the larger and larger you make a committee, but so I'm hopeful we've struck the right balance in terms of the quality of the content we're going to get versus the need to represent all the different professional aspects of this and those who were affected. Okay, so with that, you've made any other? Okay, so can we just have a friendly amendment to the motion to add the?
Friendly amendment to add disaster specialist to emergency response.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. And who seconded?
Maggie seconded it earlier.
Or I proposed and Shanika seconded?
Shanika seconded.
It was so long ago.
Yeah, I know.
Actually,
Can you do it again?
Maggie motioned and Shanika seconded for my notes.
Okay, all right. So with that change of, or additional wording, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, thank you all for coming here tonight to talk to us about this issue. Okay, we have next, switching gears entirely, a resolution appointing a member to the Asheville City School Board of Education. Maggie Burleson, I'm going to propose that we just kind of go down the row and everyone say who they want and see if somebody gets 4 votes. So earlier today, we We interviewed 4 folks for the vacancy on the Asheville City School Board, and we are now going to fill it. We, just so everybody knows, we interviewed Jesse Warren, William Young Jr., Miri Masachi, and Pepe Acebo. So you want to start on that end?
Sure. Jesse Warren.
Jesse Warren?
Jesse Warren.
Jesse Warren.
Acknowledging the democratic process, but also the ACAE and BCAE endorsements, Jesse Warren.
Pepe Acebo.
Okay, so the school board vacancy appointment will be Jesse Warren. And thanks to everyone for coming down here and interviewing with us earlier today for that position. I'm going to hand it over to the vice mayor. Almost. You're our vice mayor now. How are you doing here? To handle the boards and commissions appointments.
Thank you, Mayor Mannheimer. Okay, the Board of Commission Committee met earlier this afternoon to review 16 appointments. Those appointments are as follows. Asheville Area Riverfront Development Commission, there were 2 seats open. Both were for business or property owners within the Riverfront District. No eligible applications were received, and so the clerk's office will re-advertise those seats. And for the Audit Committee, no applications were received. The clerk's office will re-advertise. Both these seats are for CPAs, and we've had a difficulty in finding people for these particular seats. The Board of Adjustment recommends the reappointment of Elliott Smith and the appointment of Christopher Von Danish. This particular appointment basically has 2 actual votes. And so first, we would like to take this vote for the recommendation for Elliott Smith and the appointment of Christopher Von Danish. So can I get a second?
Sandra, can I ask a question? Are we also going to go ahead and make a motion to appoint Antoinette Wise to
That's going to be the second part, because we're going to do it in 2
sorry.
parts, yes. Okay.
Very good.
Yes, okay.
So motion to
Yes,
approve?
second.
Second.
Okay. So we do a roll call?
No, we don't need a roll call.
We don't need a roll call.
Thankfully.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay.
Just say all those in favor.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And so Christopher Von Danish, who was basically the alternate for this particular board, now that he's a member of the actual board, we have that position open. So therefore, we're recommending that Antoinette Wise to fill the Christopher's current alternate role.
I would make a second that Annette Wise be the alternate.
Yes. Thank you. Can I get a second?
That was her,
That's
you're
second.
making the motion, she's seconded.
Okay. Aye.
All right, and all those
All
in
those
favor?
in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Historic Resource Commission. The Boards and Commission recommends the appointment of Alexander Ellenbogen. Is there a second?
Second.
Maggie made it.
So, and then
Okay.
all those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. The Boards and Commission Committee recommends the appointment of Celeste Ordway. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The Metropolitan Sewer District, the Board and Commissions Committee recommends the reappointment of Mayor Esther Mannheimer. Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Multimodal Transportation Committee, the Boards and Commission Committee recommends the appointment of Joseph Chesler.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and Environment. The Board and Commissions recommends the appointment of Joel Osgood, Ashley Case, Alicia Goldstein, and Sophie Mullinex.
Kim,
Can I
second.
get a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And the last but not least, Urban Forestry Commission, the Board and Commissions Committee recommends the reappointment of Patrick Gilbert and the appointment of Chardon Dietrich. Is there a second?
Kim,
Okay,
second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
That concludes the Boards and Commissions business, and I'll turn it back over to Mayor Mannheimer.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've reached the portion of our agenda where we take general public comments on items that were not on our agenda. And the first person signed up to speak is Missy Baker. And again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you all for having me. I was asked to address the mayor and city council by several businesses in Asheville. I both work in Asheville downtown on Cox Avenue, and I own a business on Cox Avenue. So both are very important to me, obviously. While I'm not fully in the loop, I feel allocating funds from the Buncombe County Tourism Development towards the Cox Avenue, Green Street, in the amount of, I heard tonight it was $1.5 million, is like painting a messy house in hopes it makes it look better, or putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Yes, it might look better, but there are far better ways to spend these funds that are long-term and are in dire need that will make the entire city look better for all and safer. We need to clean up Asheville in more ways than one. First, and we've spoken, weekly street sweepings. Weekly litter pickup by the property owners, which I personally do every day, and the city if it's on city property or sidewalks, which I also do. Staying on top of graffiti by all, possibly creating jobs to help property owners stay on top of and clean it. It has to be removed immediately, and possibly, you know, people don't realize that tagging is an advertisement of their business or their products, and to share their voice on politics. If it is not removed immediately, it's going to grow as it has been. If it is removed immediately, they will move on, and we all have to do this, even outside of the city. Tags are mostly done by gangs. They're fighting over turf, they're notifying where to buy their product. Doing this will help lower the gang activity that has been on the rise since COVID, the shootings, and the drug activity. I leave work in fear for my life every single night working on Cox Avenue, and I do for my employees. I suggest citywide cameras at intersections to help monitor our city. I have security cameras all the way around my business and my building, and I have turned in a lot of footage of people tagging other businesses. Homeless camps, hear me out, and I'm gonna go over for a second because I think I might be the only person, but in the 20s and 30s, there were homeless camps. We need to have some sort of homeless camp come up. I know it's an issue, and we've all talked about it, but it's the white elephant in the room. They have to be monitored 24/7 by security and checked by APD with drug dogs, because that's for the safety of the people living there, whether it's temporary or not. And they have to be cleaned.
And if you have further comments, you can always email us or submit them to the clerk or anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Nina Tovish.
I'm returning to an example from our recent experience, but I hope you understand that it has broader implications. One thing citizens want from their government is the truth. We don't like being lied to. We were told the city couldn't provide water outage maps because of consumer privacy concerns or homeland security regulations. Information about the location of public water infrastructure is readily available. An outage map was never going to reveal any information that wasn't easily obtainable by other means. Let's face it, if terrorists want to sabotage our water system, an outage map wasn't going to make it any easier than it already is. Admittedly, I'm not a lawyer. But even if there were actual legal obstacles, who exactly was going to prosecute or pursue a civil suit? The federal government? I can't imagine a court looking kindly on federal prosecution for publishing an outage map during an officially declared state of emergency when citizens' safety and well-being was at stake. Similarly, a private citizen was going to bring suit based on what harm to them exactly? Such a grievous breach of their water supply privacy that they sustained actual damages of some sort? I can't imagine a court giving the time of day to such a claim. When government tells citizens that they can't have information, supplies dubious reasons why not, and then 2 days later actually provides the information they asked for, it loses trust. It turns out it was possible to give us a GIS map of the outage areas. Other municipalities, of course, do this on the regular. When citizens see the government spinning excuses and explanations that neither hold water nor last very long, people's trust is eroded. And that's the very trust that is vital in getting important things done. When people don't trust their government, conspiracy theories proliferate. Important safety announcements aren't taken seriously. People start wondering about widespread corruption and incompetence. These responses erode the ability of government to actually do the people's work. It's a downward spiral of mistrust and ineffectiveness. What happens during the next emergency? Truth-telling means taking responsibility. Truth-telling enables accountability. If there's an actual reason you can't provide maps, own it. Maybe no one was available to make them, or a lack of actual data about where the outages were. And if it's because a map would make the city look bad, admit it. But please, next time, don't lie to us.
Dee Pierce.
Good evening, Council. I'm Diana D. Pierce, the Secretary of the Asheville Pickleball Association. Now, there have been some very heavy conversations here tonight, and as a local citizen, I just want to say I do appreciate all that you're doing to solve these many issues to help try to move this city forward. But I'm here to share 4 quick points on behalf of our association. Appreciation, number 1. The Asheville Pickleball Association would like to express our appreciation to the council and our city manager and to the Parks and Recreation Department as led by Dee Tyrell for handling the process of negotiating to a shared court concept, which you all have been part of, for both the pickleball and tennis user groups. The solution calls for all Asheville public courts to be lined for pickleball, with some courts receiving semi-permanent nets. What remains is finalizing the user schedule, which defines what group has priority access at what days and at what times. 3 meetings have been jointly held so far between tennis and pickleball representatives, as led by Asheville Parks and Rec, to develop this mutually agreed upon and supported schedule. And we appreciate the opportunity to have an active role in developing this schedule, and we look forward to its implementation. Asheville Pickleball Association is well on its way to becoming a 501c3 nonprofit. We've completed each of the required steps, and at this time are just awaiting the certification letter from the state confirming our status. Montford concerns. The Asheville Pickleball Association is well aware and shares in the concerns expressed about pickleball play by the Montford community, and in particular, the Montford residents surrounding the public courts. We understand that it is the responsibility of the city and the Parks and Recreation Department to work these concerns out. We've offered several suggestions to Parks and Rec that may be helpful, and we are ready to participate more deeply in the process if that would be helpful. Lastly, we want to thank you again. We want to thank you for all your support. We want to also welcome to council the newest member, Maggie. And we'd also like to end by saying, Jonathan, we know you secretly love pickleball.
Well,
thank you.
We're in luck. We're going to be able to find out because he's our next speaker. Thank you.
I saw her in Ingles one day, and I didn't recognize her. She said, "Hey, Jonathan," and I was like, I don't know who you are. And then she said that she was a pickleball person. I think I said, oh my God, you're a pickleball person. And then I said, I really like I don't have an issue with the pickleball people. And I also recognize that there's a lot more of you than me. And she said, yeah, Jonathan, we know. Sent chills down my spine. I forgot an important piece of history that I don't have any data to back up, but I'm certain that Councilwoman Smith broke some kind of record in the least amount of money spent on the most amount of votes ever gotten. 0 money.
Mm-hmm.
Bam. That's doing more with the least amount, and I think it bespeaks the amount of respect that the community has for you over the 5 years that you put into that. So, yay that. And Sage had asked who the first mayor was that was directly elected, and I still don't necessarily know, but I think Lenny was the first one that served a 4-year term, Lenny Sitnick. So there was that. And as we were talking about special laws that pertain to Asheville, Buncombe only, my very favorite special only Buncombe County law is the Reed-Howell Act of 1931, which I don't have a whole lot of time to get into tonight, but don't worry, it's coming. And again, I just appreciate everybody's service this, over the years, and looking forward to all that you do. I considered making a pitch to be on the water committee thing, because I'm no one could accuse you of stacking it with yes men, I mean, I would be in there as the city's harshest critic, but I'm going to focus on other things. So there you go. If you got any other questions for me, I'm always available. I had a moment on New Year's Eve. I thought to just email the mayor and say, I don't blame you for this. I know that you got a lot going on. I got an automatic response, of course, and then like an hour later, she actually responded to me and make people.
Says a lot about my New Year's
somebody
Eve.
responded to me, did they? Anyway, I thought that was nice. And again, I know that you've been in a tough spot, and thanks for handling it so well, and everybody else.
Thanks. That was me, partying up New Year's Eve. Katie Hudson.
Hello again. Just wanted to, a little bit off topic of my last one, just wanted to follow back up with actionable buy-in is a lot more efficient at establishing public trust than PR spin. And I don't say that derogatorily. I mean, like, PR has its place, but you will not waste as much time with communications if the communications make people feel heard and seen as equals. And that would include things like giving us access to water bottles or water test strips in the event of an emergency, to trust that we know how to take care of ourselves and each other in partnership with you. I think if you give action items to the public, we can be trusted to act in our collective best interest. And it would save everyone a lot of time and hassle if we used existing infrastructure like the Asheville app to be able to communicate the veracity of the claims by the water department of whether it is clean and back on. People would feel listened to, heard, and respected if we had an opportunity to provide feedback in a real-time manner in future disasters, which, again, I don't want to sound too negative, but extreme weather events are going to happen more and more regularly, and we can survive them together if we just trust and be humble about it and not try to CYA. Let's just see each other, Okay, that's all I gotta say. We can be trusted to do stuff. Just, let us do something. We wanna help.
That is the last person signed up under general public comment. So unless there are any other items, we are adjourned.